All right, so let's do a little bit of historical background on the distance learning. It did start a while ago, and the first documented example of that was in 1728, when somebody called Caleb Phillips would teach shorthand to students by exchanging letters. And of course, ever since the 1700s, that everything was done by post, by mail, a lot of things have changed. Now, for our specific context, the ELT teaching, the 50s, 60s, and the 70s, where distance learning started to be used, it was at that time that we had different kinds of approaches and methods. For that, technology played a vital role because we had the tape recorders. I'm not certain if some of you is old enough in this audience to remember tape recorders and those methods that you would buy from the bookstore to learn a foreign language, English, or any other. So those were based on the audiolingual approach and autonomous learning that students or any kind of learner would buy a set of equipment, cassettes, some print, a book, and then they would sit alone at home. Mostly they would repeat things and they would learn like that. Of course, since then, things have changed yet again, since technology has affected that. Yeah, somebody saying that the tape recording was amazing, which is, yeah, I think lots of people have learned a lot of foreign languages or let's say topics that they were interested in. Now, has this changed in our years? Absolutely, yes. Of course, at the beginning, conventional learning material was digitized, which means we had, I would say, electronic copies of material. They were digitized by technology. Plain, I would say now, when we see them, boring PDFs or boring just pages, and those were made available to teachers and students, of course. It was used as guidance for students with, of course, instructor support, synchronously or asynchronously. Now, these are, I think, also some terms that are being used a lot lately. So just for the sake of clarification, synchronously means when there is interaction live. So for example, this is a synchronous webinar, and asynchronous would be if there is time in between. So if we had, you would have a course over correspondence or over email these days, you would send your material to your instructor, professor, or teacher, and then they would reply back. So that would be asynchronous. Also, for example, forums can be asynchronous communication. So when time is in between the instruction, the learning, then we call it asynchronous. And of course, asynchronous was the most common form of learning at the beginning, and then it became synchronous, of course, with the advancement of technology. So I have a question for all of you, and I would like just to put a yes or a no on the chat box. Have you all been asked to teach on distance learning platform lately? We'll just take 1 minute. I see a lot of yeses. So I presume the majority of you have, right? Okay. I've been asked to do the same, although I've been teaching online for quite a while. Now, we have been asked, this is what our reality used to be. We used to be in conventional classrooms. I don't know if you're using a blackboard or whiteboard or even an interactive board. And then the students would be, physically in our classes, and we would be having our sessions. Now, from that, we have been asked to transition to that. I managed to find that on a video on YouTube where students, place a phone in front of the laptop and they pretend they're there, but most likely they're doing something else. So the dynamics have changed, I think, over the online learning nowadays. Another question for you, have you taught online before? Meaning, have you had experience with online teaching before? No, never, no, no, yes, one time, yes, no, limited, yep, no. Right, so I see the majority of the answers going towards no. So we'll take it that maybe some of you have not and some of you have, which is actually very, very good. Now, another interesting question. Do you think that online teaching is the same with face-to-face? A yes or a no? Great. A lot of no's. Not in entirety. No. Great. It's very, very different. I do agree. Yes, I can see your messages. They pop up on my screen. Now, I would like to make something clear, and maybe this is something that a lot of you have been thinking, that educators around the world have been asked to transfer their face-to-face classes online almost instantly. Of course, you understand this is a total disruption in the teaching methods and in the teaching balance, I would say, in the class, and that for sure it has created some sort of issues, and we have seen different scenarios. For example, where I'm located, the majority of the institutions were asked to go towards online teaching in a matter of days, let's say. In other countries, in other countries, the schools were closed or have been closed for a while. Some other schools or universities around the world, they will not open until September. There are different scenarios and different approaches around the world. So what we're experiencing right now, there is a terminology, and I managed to find a very good article that it's actually like a rubric that you can use, and you can see what sort of approach are you taking towards your classes. What we would name what's happening right now in our classrooms is emergency remote instruction. So it is not on the basis of distance learning, and we will see in a couple of minutes why this is different. It is emergency because we are in state of emergency when schools or universities or any learning experience center has been asked to close. It is remote because we cannot physically be in classes. So in the rubric that I have, and I can share the link with you to on my references, you can see how different is the face-to-face instruction with the online instruction. So what do you need to do in order to make certain that your students are aware? Because we will be talking a little bit about it. It's not only about us having the shock and having all these issues. We also need to cater and think about our students who are learning. Now, we will go back to our distance learning feasibility. How feasible is distance learning? It is, even in those circumstances where it is remote and where it's an emergency. It is feasible. It can be achieved, of course, but it needs a lot of work. It does need training, resilience, time, patience, staying late at night from multiple parties. And when I say multiple parties, yes, it is us, it is the students, but we also need to involve parents. We also need to involve situations, space, internet width, bandwidth, anything that you can think of does play an important role in distance learning. And we will see how in a few minutes. So we'll go through the face-to-face curricula. And when I say face-to-face, it's the ones that we used to teach when we would see our students in a physical space. So they are designed for classroom use, where human interaction plays a significant role. And this is a key factor here, human interaction. The instructor plays a major role to facilitate learning and support students face-to-face. Of course, there's always support, but the key point here is that it happens face-to-face. Students have to physically attend class and participate. So we see them, we ask questions, we ask them to do group work, teamwork, all sorts of activities, and they have to physically be there. There's interaction among students, and the instructor is in a physical space, and that's very, very important. Now, when we go back to talking about online curricula, these are designed for distant learning use, where electronic implementation and interaction play a significant role. So we have the electronic implementation of the material being taught, of the equipment that we use, of the material, of the books, of the worksheets, of everything that we're using. The instructor is the facilitator to learning and support students virtually with the tools available. That is different from the face-to-face interactions that we have. There is support for the students. For example, when you're at universities, you do have office hours where you can help your students. This is done now through different kinds of platforms, and you need to set up an appointment, and all of those. They're different but the same at the same time. Students have to virtually attend class and participate with their electronic devices. There is interaction among students and the instructor in a virtual environment, in the main room or breakout rooms, depending on which platform you use. Now, these are the major differences. So they're different curricula that serve the same purpose. So if you do have your learning objectives, the goals that you need to achieve, then the curricula will be the same in content, but the approaches will be different because of course, the technology. The role of the instructor is the same, but with different means. So because we're not, of course, in a classroom, we are in a virtual classroom, technology plays a vital role to that, and we'll talk about that in a second again. Students and instructors can attend from the ease of their home. So we don't have to go from one place to another. It's interesting to see that still students are late. And then, so now you ask them, why are you late? And then they just start saying, well, I overslept, which is a different set of excuses than when they used to come on campus. And students and instructors have to use technology, which is mandatory. So again, the power of technology has shifted. So when we are in a physical class, in a face-to-face class, we do, we have all those trainings that we have to use technology. We have to, technology is the media. But now there is a power shift of technology. Technology has kind of taken over in that. Yeah, there are lots of commuting expenses that are being saved. I agree. The student-teacher interaction differs. I have personally seen difference in the way that my students interact with me, or still when you're in a class, you will have the quiet students that sit in the back of the class. But when you are on a call, let's say like the one that we have now, or on a different platform, then personally, I have seen that there are more quiet students than there were before. And of course, that students can just log on and just be there. So when you're asking them questions, you're just making certain that they are there. And it's mandatory in my class for them to be talking. Now, moving on to the impact, because as I've said before, it does have an impact on both educators and learners. For educators, primarily, we do have a variety of challenges: technological, instructional, behavior, and other that implement online curricula. And students may have similar challenges, and we will see some research that I personally did a few years ago. How do students feel about incorporating technology in their learning? Now, educators, of course, may find it challenging to adapt to distance learning practices because they may not be aware of the distance learning practices. In the mainstream programs, and when I'm talking about mainstream programs, would be the residential or mainly the residential programs. I'm not talking about online BAs or masters. They usually entail technology incorporation, but they don't focus so much on distance learning. I had to take, for example, in my experience, when I was doing my master's back in 2006 or 2007, I had to take a call class, computer-assisted language learning. it was a mandatory course for our degree, and this is something that actually has helped me. Of course, I was coming from a computer science background, so technology was very much known to me. But I think that, I didn't have any fears after that, which is something that I see some of my colleagues having. Educators may need to go out of their way to learn how to teach via distance learning, and this is something that you can think about and see what sort of programs are out there, because and especially nowadays, there's a plethora of programs and certificates, but you have to make certain that you're choosing the right program, the right experience that fits your educational environment. Now, technology can play a vital role when we're implementing distance learning programs, but what happens when technology fails? What happens when the internet fails? So I don't know where all of you are located, in which country, but I'm lucky enough to have a good internet connection. I'm in Saudi Arabia currently, but I've had calls, or I've had quiz nights with friends of mine, or when I have some meetings abroad and people connect from other countries, the internet connection always, most of the times, it fails. Now, what do we do? So in a physical classroom, when you're a teacher and you're teaching, you always have a plan B, or at least you can improvise. Now, what can you do in a distance learning environment? Well, in a distance learning environment, you must make certain that you have solutions ready that can be implemented right away. For example, if your internet breaks down, there's not so much you can do, which means you will have to do that class again, or you'll have to see what your institution says. If there is bad connection, for example, you can use email. You can send the assignments of the students there. You can wait until the internet comes back. You can do all sorts of things. I know it doesn't sound so feasible, but you have to get used to it, because it will happen, especially nowadays that the internet is there's so much traffic online. I was reading an article the other day, and it says that the internet in our area has gone up about 600% from what it was before. And this is normal because everybody's at home, everybody's working from home. The kids are being homeschooled. There's so much streaming that the internet is very, very busy. Netflix, I think, and YouTube were asked to their quality should go down because they're taking too much of internet. Another important aspect of all this teacher education is teacher burnout. We have to be very, very careful on how we train the staff, the faculty, and how much of online webinars or online instruction you see, or courses that you take. You have to be picky. You have to see what is being offered, and you have to see what suits your educational environment. We should not always, if there's an opportunity, we should go for it. You need to see if this opportunity is for you. Otherwise, you will experience burnout, because you will either hear the same things over and over again, or you will hear product information about softwares or things that you're not using. So I'm responsible for training university teachers at our institution, and we've been running some live sessions, some recorded sessions. So there is some sort of a choice for faculty and staff. Now, what are the needs of the educators? The needs of the educators are a lot at this time. As I said, since this is emergency remote instruction, you need to have material or products that can be used right away. You need to have complete solutions that can be tailored to the individual needs of the learners. So you need to have some material or any kind of resource, online tools that are tailored to the individual needs. And this is very, very important. And I'll be talking later about it so you can see how you can tailor your material. And you also need to have continuous support. So whenever you choose something, an online solution, you must make certain that wherever you get the solution from, there needs to be support. The learner impact for the students. Of course, students are shocked and they have not experienced distance learning before. I'm talking about the majority, and I'm talking about English language instruction. So we need to help them, support them, and train our students, because you need to remember, as much as we need training, they also need to be trained. Some common misconceptions about our students. We tend to think that students are tech savvy, they can achieve anything we assign to them, and actually they can achieve things that they achieved back in the classroom. Students will do okay because they're born in a technologically advanced area. Now, I will focus a little bit of that on my further on, but I just want you to think that because students have a cell phone, it doesn't really mean that they know technology. So these are misconceptions. What do we need to focus on? Now, I personally did a study in 2017 about students using their mobile phones in the classroom. And what I found out was that students use their phone for basic purposes, like photos, messaging, and social media. They're overwhelmed by technology for learning. So when we suggest and give them, a learning management system, or watch this video, or listen to that recording, or do this, they're being overwhelmed, because usually these things are not connected in one platform. They're random in a sense. So they need to be, put in a nice platform. And believe it or not, and they may not have the proper equipment and software to participate in class. We all think that they have, laptops, and they have tablets, and they have cell phones and everything. But sometimes we do see that the only equipment that they have is just their phone, or something that is not useful for classroom use. The most important and interesting fact that I found, which it never dawned on me, of course, back then, was that students are not familiar to type on a keyboard. So they know how to type very well on a cell phone, but they're not familiar to type on a keyboard. And that creates a lot of issues when doing activities or exercises online. Some fun facts. When students were asked to join the distance learning platforms, initial problems were they could not log into the site, like some of us did today. They could not turn on and turn off the camera, and they could not turn on and off the microphone, which are the bare minimum of interaction online, but they do happen. So what do students need? Of course, they need some help. What can you do to be supported as an instructor and to be able to help your students? So you need to find a solution that will be offering a variety of options, like a synchronous and asynchronous mode. And I'm very, very careful with what I'm saying. You need to be able to have the material that you're using in online mode and in an offline mode. This is very, very important. You need to have educator support as well as student support. Now, let's see the ELT through some online tools. So all the tools that are available out there, can they help and support you? So the internet is, it's huge and vast. Yeah, WhatsApp could be used, I agree, and lots of tools can be used, but can all of them help you and support you in the same way? Most likely not. You need to be cautious. They need to reflect the learning objectives that you have on your syllabi. They need to be culturally adapted to your region. You know that there is a lot of inappropriate material on the internet, especially if it's not protected. And there are lots and lots and lots of articles nowadays about online platforms not being secure. So you have to secure your session with a password. You have to lock your class. You have to do all sorts of security measures that are necessary. But yet again, the culture has to be there, because this is what your situation is. So if you have something that is non-appropriate for the MENA region or for the Middle East, then what do you do? And then remember that when we're doing the remote instruction now, you have the parents right in front of the screen. So that is something that you need to be very aware of. And again, synchronicity and asynchronicity. So these are some of the tools. What do you need to do? Because we're preparing students for academia, so we need to use academic content. We use to activate prior knowledge, not just, learning comes through their prior knowledge, scaffolding instruction on our behalf, to organize information, to interact with other people as much as possible. And different platforms have breakout rooms, or you can work with your main room. You can have students talk to each other. They can go on a breakout room and talk and then come back, and you can monitor those. And another important aspect is cultivate critical thinking, because this is what we're going to be asked to do. Critical thinking is very, very important. And although we're teaching language, critical thinking comes through everything. I personally teach critical thinking as a college course, and this is something that I think is one of the most important courses at a university level. But I don't see it as a standalone class in a university. I see it as something that is very, very much important from day one. It has to start from the family, then it goes to the school where they learn language, etc., etc., etc. Critical thinking is everywhere in life. Now, one of the tools that is very, very useful for on behalf of us is Connect. I'm not certain if all of you have access to Connect or have experienced Connect in the past. So new interactions, material that we're talking about is delivered through this platform. And it has, as you see, millions of interactions in 2018 and billions of questions answered since 2009. This is what a typical classroom, a typical Connect session looks like. So on the right side, you see the book that we're talking about, new interactions, reading and writing, listening and speaking. And on the left hand, you have all the types of assessments that you can have. So you have question banks, LearnSmart, Achieve, Power Process, a blog assignment. You can put an attachment, an assignment on a file, web activity, etc. So these are some sample assignments that I created, for example, for my class. You can make it nicer, just put my picture, but you can put all sorts of material around, messages and assignments. This is how the student is experiencing the platform. So you can see that they have their assignments, they have their calendar, they have their schedule, they have their help, they have their resources, all sorts of things that they can interact with as its interactions. I'm going to go through very, very briefly through the four tools that I would like you to see. Primarily, it's the Read Anywhere. This is, I think, a unique feature that you can actually have your book. You can download your book on your application. So students actually can have their book on their phone, and they can do assignments, they can do their fun activities, they can do all sorts of things. I really like this graph. So say goodbye to heavy books and backpacks. So everything can be stored on your phone, and you can download it and be there. I think it's quite fun. These are some screenshots that I personally took from my phone while I wanted to show you what the Read Anywhere application looks like. And it's quite, I think, you can see the broad range of things that you can do, even for listening, for speaking. The audios are there. You can download the audio, you can download. It's all packed in one place. I mean, you don't have to have more than one application or any sort of material. So this could be on your phone, or your student's phone, and they can do their activities there. They can check if the answer is right, and so on and so forth. The LearnSmart This comes to play when you're doing personalized learning. So I have been teaching for about 15 years, and I've always had students that cannot follow with the class. So I always had to prepare material separately for them. I always had to help them on the side. They would come after my class. They would be, lagging a little bit behind or in the brink of failing. So I always wanted to help them. And I think that was one of the most important things that, I did for them, was to help and support them. But it was very, very tiring. So I would be very much obliged if I had a system where I could do that. Well, you can do that through Connect again. So you can have an adaptive study plan, which means that you tailor and you tell the system what kind of practice would you like your students to have, in what sort of skills, what sort of, you want a grammar practice, vocabulary practice, how much, if you want less content or more content about that, it gives you the time required. And students can do that on the side. It's individualized and it helps them to catch up with the class, to learn more things. This is done individually and separately from the whole class and from the whole class material. And you can set it up. You can set it up for each individual student. Further to that, I told you before that this is the critical thinking for me is very, very important. And I think that it should be taught in every level of education. So the power of process is here, and this is a tool that we use for further, to promote their critical thinking more. This is a tool that again is used for the class, and you can use it for all your students. Now you tailor it, which means you can upload a document. You can ask students to upload a document, maybe an article, maybe a blog, maybe something that they found interesting, or you can choose from a database. So the database is very much organized to the CFR levels, or word counts, or themes. You can preview the text. For example, I chose the 21st century skills text here, and you can see you can assign students what to do with it. So here it gives you a broad range of options of what to do. Before reading, after reading, during reading, you choose the skills and you choose what students can do. And of course, that gives them extra practice on the side of how they should be dealing with a specific strategy. Again, it's tailor-made. You decide what to do. You decide how many options students will have. You can add or delete as you see fit for each classroom. And this goes directly to the students, and you also set the time. Last but not least, when you do have your Connect account and you're teaching digitally through there, you can have 13 reports. I'm not going to go through the reports, but they provide analytics for your students. So I think that's another important aspect when we're dealing with large classes or with different types of assessment, quizzes, tests, informal tests, pop quizzes, formative assessments, summative assessments, all sorts of these. You have one place where everything is organized, where everything is stored, and then you can go and get your reports from there. So it's actually a very, very useful tool for all of us to be using, and for students as well, so they can see their progress throughout the year, the semester, the term, whatever you have. So that's the range of sections of reading and writing, listening and speaking, from interactions 1 to interactions 4. All right, so question time.
We have one question from a colleague asking, are these apps for free? I think they mean to say that, they perhaps understood it in a way that there are different apps that we're talking about. In fact, we are not. There is one app called Read Anywhere, as Georgios mentioned, and that comes free to provide offline access to our English program called New Interactions. And the other stuff that you looked at, that is available through McGraw Hill's platform called Connect. Just wanted to share this. And there is another question, Georgios. We have, can this be used to make a timed reading test?
Yes, of course, it can be. You can assign reading for students, and you can specify the time, you can specify the pages, you can specify everything that you want. You can set up the rules for your reading.
And the question, is there any upcoming webinar on the same topic? Yes, we do have a repeat session on Wednesday. If you are registered, you can join in. It's going to be a repeat session of the same. And we may announce more sessions in future. We will let you know.
Right. I see another question, sorry, that it says, are those functions of Connect or the ebook? So I just wanted to make clear that we're talking about the digital material that is for new interactions, and everything that I've described is included in the digital version of interactions, of new interactions.
A question from a colleague here. What's the perfect number of learners in an online teaching session, having in mind different ages?
Yeah, I've been actually teaching online for an association, and I think that they usually have 16 or 17 people in their classes, and what they've decided is that they will strictly limit the number of students to 8, and that is because they don't think that more than 8 people is comfortable for language learning online.
I have a question. So other than McGraw Hill Connect, which someone tried to use with the Blackboard a few years ago, is there something merely for teachers to be brought online, such as an online resource?
Was that a question for me?
I think it might be for Nasir.
Can you please come again? I was busy writing a response. Yes.
That's fine. So I think other than Connect, someone's asking if there's anything else that can be brought online as an online resource at McGraw Hill.
If yours is a higher ed institution, yes, there are other things that can be purchased. But Connect is the underlying platform. All courses and programs provided for McGraw Hill to higher ed institutions are based on Connect. And this platform, there is a question I just answered. It's compatible with Blackboard, which is the most popular learning management system being used in universities. So it works seamlessly with Blackboard.
Okay, next question is, does this material take cultural sensitivities into account?
Yeah, I can answer that if you want. Yes, it does, because it is material that has been created for the MENA region, for the Middle East and MENA, so that would take care of that. I think colleagues that are joining are from this part of the world.
Thank you. So we've got another question. Do you agree that assessment in online teaching is more challenging than in face-to-face teaching?
I personally do. I agree that assessment is different. It's not more difficult, but it's different. So you need to be able to find the online tools, and of course, it depends what kind of class are you teaching. Like, are you teaching a reading and writing class? Are you teaching an IELTS prep course? Are you teaching, a listening and speaking class? So you need to find out what your learning outcomes are, and then how do you assess them. So for example, if you did in a class, you would do, an exam or a quiz. Can you do that online? I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of websites now that offer this option. But going back to here, for example, on Connect, I can tell you, because I've been using that in my class, that I can assess my students in a way that I would do with the pen and paper. So I assign the quiz, they take the quiz, it's live. Of course, yeah, there are the issues of if the students are cheating, or if the students are, yes, you do have those issues, but we all need to look at this at the specific time, right? So we need to see that this is an emergency remote instruction, and we all need to take care of faculty and students. We need to trust students as we trust our instructors to teach those classes. So I would say try to find the proper tools to use for your assessment. And there's lots of tools, and you can send me an email. I mean, my email will come up in the next slide if you need specific tools for assessment.
Thank you. And I think this one might be for Nasir, but can teachers create virtual classrooms on Connect?
There are tools available to support, distance learning and online teaching and learning, but not exactly virtual classrooms. These days there are so many things available and are being offered to educators that they end up mixing things. Would you like to add something, Georgios? Have you come across a virtual classroom setup?
What I would say for the virtual classes that has worked for me is you can record sessions. So I mean, you can record sessions and you can have them on your screen, on your section, on your class online. So students, and I'm not saying like you record a whole class, but maybe you have questions from students, and instead of addressing just one person, you can answer with a short video of 2, 3, 5 minutes, and then everybody can see. So I think through Connect, you can have, you may not be able to have online classes like other platforms, video conferencing platforms, I mean, do, but for sure you can have that option of recording, and then students can have access to it. And a very good thing about Connect is that you can share with other instructors that you want. So by providing their email, and given that they have a Connect account, you can share all your resources. So something that you're teaching, and then your colleague, next class or now next house is teaching, you can share all your resources automatically. You just have to when you're creating the assessment, you go and share it, and they can have it as well. So it's a great way also to share your resources online.
Thank you. Another one I think is probably for you as well. What do you normally do when students say their internet connection is terrible, or that it is impossible for them to attend a live classroom?
I know it's difficult to record everything, but for example, the platform that we use currently offers, that I use on my institution, offers recordings. So we do have the recordings available, but those are not by default shared with the students. So I would say the recording, or another option would be to share some notes.
Thank you. And then we've got, what are some of the challenges of keeping learners engaged when you're teaching online?
I would say try to incorporate some activities. I'm sorry I didn't do that today so much. For example, there's lots of tools that you can use for them to enjoy, like you can use Kahoot, for example. You can use something fun, as you would do in class. I mean, we don't strictly teach language and then, it's a barren class. Try to incorporate some fun activities and give them a small break. I mean, I had a student the other day, he asked me, Mr. George, can I please go to the bathroom? I'm like, of course you can, and you're at your own house. Try to, this is what I'm trying to say, try to make distance learning or emergency remote instruction a little bit more normal for them, because we are not aware how much time will this new normal will last.
Okay, and then we've got someone who's asking you to repeat what you said about the ideal number of language students in an online learning environment.
Yeah, I said that's 8. And that was from the British Council.
Thank you. And then we've got next one is, what do you think about Google Classroom as an online platform?
I think every platform has its pros and cons. So there is, you know, if we talk about platforms, there's Zoom, there's WebEx, there's Google Class, there's all sorts of things. So, I mean, I currently use Zoom and I'm pretty okay with it. I've gotten used to it. So for me, it works. I know other colleagues are using Google Classroom, which has different functionalities. You need to see which one fits better, or if your institution is using that, you need to see how does that fit your learning environment.
And looking at a platform is one thing, and then using content and tools is another. So what makes a platform more useful is probably content and tools, not just you know, the platform for the sake of platform. Google Classroom is just an empty shell where you have an opportunity to create content and share it with your students. In the same way, Connect is a learning and course management platform where you as instructors have access to the content that you need, and many different tools and resources that you can share with your students. You also have access to assessment tools that allow you to assess your students at different levels of ability. And also, I think we need to clarify this. There is a misconception. Online learning and teaching, especially these days, you know, misconceptions are common because educators are flying the plane while building it, you know. So it's an emergency situation, as Georgios pointed out. So in this situation, let's not mix things up and, you know, and see that online learning is all about meetings, using Zoom, using WebEx, using these meeting tools. It's not always, you know, practical to be in a live session. So what Georgios mentioned earlier in his session was that you need to look at different synchronous and asynchronous tools that can help you engage your students both in a live format and in an offline format.
Okay, so we've got someone who has said, in my current situation, we are using BBB incorporated into Moodle. Would you say this is similar to what Connect does? And BBB is Big Blue Button?
I'm not aware of BBB, but Moodle for sure I am. Just like Blackboard, our platform Connect works seamlessly with Moodle. There is an integration possible. So if your institute is using Moodle as an LMS, we're happy to speak with you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There are a couple of questions in the Q&A box as well, if we've got time.
Georgios, are you happy to continue on answering a few more questions?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
sure.
Okay, so the first one is this an online platform for McGraw Hill textbooks only? And that's a great question.
Let me just go. What was the question? Sorry.
Is this online platform for McGraw Hill textbooks only?
Connect, yes.
Yes.
And which age group is it suitable for?
We're talking about.
We're talking about the program, New Interactions, right?
I suppose yes.
Yes. So I suppose that the question is about New Interactions. It is suitable for adult students.
Okay, the other question is, how can we apply differentiated learning with our classes of mixed ability?
Well, if you have access to the right tools, adaptive learning tools, you can very easily. This is one of the advantages of using technology in teaching, that you can personalize and provide an adapted learning experience to each and every student. And our program, New Interactions, comes with such tools. One of them is LearnSmart Achieve, Georgios mentioned, that helps teachers deliver differentiated learning to mixed ability students.
Thanks, Nasir. And also, what is the difference between the term distance learning and online learning?
All right, so there is a difference between distance learning and online learning. The one has to do, of course, with location. So I would say that distance learning is anything that has to do with, for example, the learner and the educator are far off. But then online learning can be, I do some online learning and it's asynchronous for my work. So I do some seminars, some webinars that I have to do. There's no interaction between me and the program. So I have to complete some sessions, for example. So that would be the online learning instead of distance learning and having somebody to be corresponding or talking or what have you.
Thanks. And I think the last one I have here is, how could you encourage more students to join the virtual classes? I think that's a challenge.
I'll just have to say here what I said earlier, that we don't know what this normal is going to be. And I think although this has not been a very positive way of going online, I think it's a good test to see how much ready are we to go and do online learning, and how much are we can we use technology, and people and students, even educators, everybody has to try. This is whether we like it or not, we have to try it now. Now, how students will be motivated, this is what they have to do for now. And you will see after all this crisis, pandemic, everything, this is over, there will be people that will choose online education more. There is, because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, there's going to be a lot of, questions about, when the normal is going to come back, when referring to normal as the previous part where we could go back to classes. So there will be people that will choose online education versus face-to-face education.
Exactly, and there is another way of looking at it, Saraj, for our audience. I must say that, engaging students, it's a key challenge, and there is another way of looking at it. Instead of, motivating them to come and attend your sessions, if you have the right tools, you can actually chase them and let the content and practice follow them and be where they are, so that they can learn at their own pace and in their own way. That's what personalized learning is all about. So if we look at it from this way, this angle, we can actually, with technology, we can make learning more effective, and it can be on a flexible schedule. It can be available to them. They can do the practice and they can progress.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got another question. How can we incorporate Connect with Moodle? Can you give some examples?
I think you can incorporate it, but it has to be done through, you prepare your material on Connect, and then it's incorporated in your LMS, into your Moodle. So like a link would show up, but then they will have to it will open on Connect. So you can have all your material there visible to your students, but then it is incorporated inside Moodle, but the activities would have to happen on Connect.
Okay, thanks. Is Power of Process only for literacy studies as extra work?
As far as I've seen, yeah, it's for reading.
And there's one that says, I guess that we can also include WhatsApp technology in raising these technologies. How far do you agree upon this?
Yeah, I mean, you can use, as I said, there's lots of tools out there. I think WhatsApp, and there's lots of studies you can find online how WhatsApp has influenced education. But you just have to be a little aware of security issues with chat applications.
Okay, and the last one is, can we utilize this for teaching IELTS?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very, very useful for IELTS, as you know, IELTS is an exam techniques teaching, so it would be a very good tool to use that for IELTS.
Okay, I guess that's all. Oh, last
Right.
one. What is the most effective game-based learning tool that we can use for our EFL students?
Believe it or not, and there is research out there how Kahoot has shifted the way that English language teaching is being taught. If you go on Kahoot and you read the research papers, I mean, it's amazing how that has shifted and how it has changed the way that students learn.
Thank you.
Great. All right, just to wrap up, the final takeaways from the session today. So get educated for distance learning. Choose a solution that caters for both you and your students. Don't be afraid to ask if you have questions because it's all new to everybody. And don't forget to give yourselves and students time and resilience. At the end, this is what teaching is all about, right? And this is these are my resources. And that's my information. If you need, if you have another question or you need something, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgios.
Thank you, Georgios. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for everyone attending. I hope that was useful. So we would like to kind of let you know the session is recorded and we will send that through email to you guys after as well. And do stay connected. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. And if you have any questions, do reach out to me on my email address as well directly. And any questions that we were unable to answer, we will be saving those down and getting in touch with you individually. But yeah, thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.